In the last class, we talked about the rule of 7 and lots of different ways for you to talk about your services, talk about your products, your offers on your Instagram stories. We even talked about a few engagement boosters for you to use before important sales dates. Now, in this class, I want us to focus on sequences. How are we going to be bringing all those tools that we talked about in the last class inside sequences? But also, how are we going to be creating specific sales sequences that talk about your offers from start to finish? I would highly recommend adding some of these sequences to your day-to-day strategy. So let's take a look at them. So when you are sharing sales sequences to your Instagram stories, meaning sequences of stories that have a common goal of selling, I want you to treat them as actual storytelling, not Instagram stories. Treat them as storytelling. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they follow a logical sequence and build trust. And as we talked before, connect them to your routine. Adding a sales sequence to your Instagram stories is not an excuse to overuse text and transparencies. 90% of the time, I want you to connect it to your routine. I want you to connect it to your life, connect it to something that's happening right here and right now, because that's how you maximize them. So these are the 3 most common sales sequences that I want you to use when you are selling things. You have a client story or a testimonial, you are selling with client work, or you're selling with your behind the scenes. And of course, you're going to be using the tools we talked about in the past class to make them even stronger. Let me show you a client story sequence. So here I'm going to be talking about a client that got amazing results from her Instagram stories from the strategy we created together in a session. So, team, I have just received the best news ever from a client. Would you like to see it? Here we go. That's the invitation story. So I have a client that is a huge authority in her field. She has amazing offers, help women all over the world with their hormone health. But she didn't know how to use Instagram stories to sell her offers. During our call, we did a game-changing exercise. I used my exclusive Instagram stories methods to create a sales sequence for her. It took us 10 minutes and 5 Instagram stories. And let me show you the results. Then I add a little bit of proof, right? We're building trust. So her DM crop talking about, so that quick little change to my stories was brilliant. She got 4 DMs asking her for the link and a pay in full sign up. And it's all thanks to our proven Instagram stories sales systems. So imagine waking up with 4 figures of sales from your Instagram stories alone. DM me and I can show you how. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting the call to action. I'm inviting them to DM me and to get the methodology that I used for this client for themselves. And you can see this exact sequence that I'm talking about that my client created to generate $3,000 with the link right below this class. It was also a client story, so don't forget to check it out. So let's break this down. We start by calling people inside our sequence, then we move on to relatability. Your audience shares the same problem and they are seeing you solve it. This second story right here is super important. Why does a story like this work? Why does a sequence like this work? You are talking about a client that went from A to B and now is getting results, okay? And what's happening here is that this client that is in A and you're describing what life was like in A, they are connecting to your current audience because your current audience also has those same problems, and you want your current audience to see themselves in this client's shoe and see, oh my God, they had the same problems as I did, and May or you just fixed them. May just solved their problems. That's what we want to do. Showing the past, showing where your clients were before is going to bring relatability to your stories. And remember, relatability is a big portion of what we call generating desire. This is why we talk about the past situation of your client. Then we talk about the how. It's important for them to see that what you're doing is real. So you need to share how you did it. You don't need to go in detail, talk about your frameworks, your methodologies, but you need to share how you did it. Then we show some proof. Remember that trust building part of desire. Great DM crop, like we talked about in the rule of 7. We added some more details at the bottom. And then the solution. What was the offer that did this? This is your time to talk about what offer you're selling that your audience can buy too. And then the CTA. What next? How do they get that offer that you just talked about? Okay, you don't need to necessarily finish your sequence here and then go, blank, disappear from the face of the earth. You can continue your day as normal with other topics, or you can add even more testimonials after. You can add maybe even other ways to use your methodology. So you can continue your framework. The call to action can appear at any time in your stories. So that was selling with a client story. Now you tell me, May, I don't have any strong testimonials like those. Look, you don't necessarily need to have strong testimonials like those to sell. You can talk about the fact that you gave your client more time, that you helped them ease their back pain, that you helped them find a dress for their friend's wedding. You can talk about these small things that seem small, but it's all in the way you communicate them. It's all in the importance you give to them. If it's important to your client and if they're thanking you, then it's important enough to share it in your stories. Now let's take a look at selling with client work. This does not necessarily require you to talk about results, but it's a great way to talk about what you're doing now and show your current audience your current offers, right? So here I'm starting, good morning, 2 client calls done today, 5 emails drafted for client R, LinkedIn strategy presented for client T. Then we continue by saying, my client is someone that has thousands of subscribers on their email list, but hasn't managed to send emails consistently. The subscribers are just sitting there and they're not profiting from their email. We have just created a full welcome sequence together with 5 emails to nurture, but also sell to this audience. What am I doing in this story right here, team? What I'm doing is I am showing the problem that my client had. I'm showing the life before. And I'm also sharing the how. How am I solving this problem? Am I sharing the life after? No, because I don't have a testimonial from that client yet. But I'm showing you exactly what I'm doing. And that's what I want you to do with your work. To show that you're open for business, to show your offers. Then on the next story, we just simply say email drafts ready to go. There you go, job done. Now, remember the rule of 7. If you post a single sequence and disappear, it may not make a difference. But if you keep posting sequences consistently, and if you keep bringing up your work, you keep talking about what you're doing, chances are that you are going to get clients from this. You are showing you're open for business. You are showing that people are buying. If you have proven offers, it's a no-brainer. Now imagine that you recently talked about that client, you talked about their life before, and now you really want to focus more on the work that you are doing. I'm going to share a sequence right now that will show you exactly how I did that. But also here's just a little note that people don't remember things that you did before, so don't be afraid to talk about the same client over and over again. That's not a problem. So in this sequence right here that you're seeing on my screen, I'm showing the work. I am focusing on the work that is being done. I'm not going to read it, but I just want you to see that I start with a picture that's very eye-catching. Then I continue on by giving a background of what we did, how the day went, and then I continue by talking a little bit about the results we're already getting. And of course, I show a little bit of proof. I show what that all looks like on the document that we're creating together. Then we're gonna go on to selling with your behind the scenes. And that one is super fun. This one can be done by literally anybody. Talk about what you're doing during your day. What is it that you're currently doing? Here I have a very small sequence talking about the work that I did. So with a photo shoot. I don't normally take product pictures, but when I do, they turn out really pretty. Now it's time for shots in this $1 million bathroom. This was actually a video. The trail of photo scenarios keep growing. This was also a video. And then would you like to see the end results? And then the next day I shared the final picture. Now, as I mentioned before, those are the 3 sequences that I want you to be using on a more regular basis. Now, there are, of course, a few more different types of sequences, and if you go to our Google Sheet, you will see other types of sequences, but these I'd like you to use with moderation. Not because they are boring or less effective, but because they are harder to connect to your routine. And if you don't connect them to your routine, they become less effective. However, for one of them, I'm going to show you what one of my clients did, and she did a brilliant job connecting it to her routine. So what are these sequences? Selling with a personal story, selling with a pain point, selling with FOMO alone, so just FOMO, not related to a story, and then selling with gamification. So why should we not use them as often? Because they're harder to connect to your routine. They usually require longer sequences, a lot of text, and then consequently they give lower reach. So this is a sequence I created to sell with FOMO, the fear of missing out. I'm not going to read this, but I'm going to explain to you the logic behind it, and then after make sure to pause, read the sequence from start to finish. So essentially here I was just creating anticipation towards a launch that I was going to do. I was going to reopen my course for 24 hours because my followers and my new followers were asking me for it. Notice how this story has zero connection to my routine or my day-to-day life. This means that it gets very monotonous, very boring. It has lots of text, lots of transparencies, and of course my reach is going to go down very fast. However, I am trying to use here a lot of curiosity, a lot of DM crops, and building a lot of excitement around this launch that's going to happen so that my reach doesn't drop as much. I had to post this sequence to show that I had something coming up, but if I were to post something like that on a day-to-day basis, what I would do instead is record a little video talking. Record a little video talking, maybe put a picture before, a picture after with some DM crops. Because if you do this on a day-to-day basis, your reach is going to drop a lot. And now here it's selling with a personal story and a pain point. So nothing connected to my routine at all. I was just talking about a story from the past, right? Everybody talks about the price of investing, but nobody talks about the price of staying stuck. And I was telling my audience how I stayed stuck in the past because I was making the same mistakes over and over again. So can you see how this is very text heavy? Sometimes these stories are necessary to build credibility, but on a day-to-day basis, I would not overdo with this type of story like this. So I started in a way that grabbed their attention, that they could relate to me. I built a logical sequence of events. Once you finish reading that sequence, this is how it ended. Okay, there are 2 hours remaining to join Remarkable and get your Black Friday. So here's where the FOMO really starts. Countdown, more DM crops, the link, more countdowns, and then the final 30 minutes here. This was the very last day of Remarkable. Now, remember that I talked about a client that did an amazing job with one of these very heavy stories and they managed to connect it to their day-to-day routine. Well, they did it. And it was through selling with gamification. This client is the Juice Barn, and I'm going to show you their story sequence right now. So what does the Juice Barn sell? They sell juice, but they also sell shots, healthy shots, of course. They sell treats, they sell lunches. So I'm gonna show you their story. So as you pause and read this, I want you to notice how they started by inviting their audience, and then everything else is a game of what are they going to eat today. So essentially the viewer is picking everything they are going to be eating that day, or more specifically, what Lou is going to be eating that day. Notice how this gets the viewer involved. Notice how this gets the viewer coming back for more. and even waiting for their next Instagram stories. This was a brilliant way to incorporate their products and even talk about the benefits of their products in between each poll. So this is how that sequence ended. They talked about lunchtime, did the same game again, and then finally the snack time, and then a call to action at the end asking what they would like to see next. When you are done with your Instagram story sequence, make sure to put a direct link to your offer or a DM me. What we don't want happening is you telling people to go to the link in bio. Okay, that's too much effort. They're not going to do it. So one of the things that I love doing is asking people to DM me, because then the conversation continues and I can follow up with them after. Understand if they signed up, understand if they bought it, understand how I can help them. It's all about customer service, right? So yeah, DM me always works wonders if you have a slightly higher ticket offer. And remember that when we are selling, story views are not your priority. Yes, you need to watch them, but what I really want you to think about is that generating emotion in your audience, getting them to participate, generating the desire we talked about is much bigger than getting engagement or getting reach or getting whatever, okay? These sequences right here will beat any day somebody that is creating, do you prefer tea or coffee? Wouldn't you agree? So to finish off our class, stick to the first 3 story sequences that we talked about. So the client stories, the behind the scenes, and the client work. Add FOMO and all other techniques we saw in class 2 to them. So what do I mean by that? We want to be adding the countdowns, the DM crops, maybe even resharing what other people are talking about. Use the other 3 stories with moderation, unless you can manage to do like my client did and connect to your routine. And go easy on text and transparencies. I will see you in the next class.